The one habit you should never learn in your relationship, and I've discussed this in other videos as well, is you should never learn to be silent. It is a horrible habit no one should pick up and adopt. You think you're preserving your peace. You think that you're, minimizing the arguments, and which you may be. Let me give you some credit there, right? But you think you're avoiding conflict and, you know, maintaining a more harmonious experience. You think you're avoiding that uncomfortable situation, which in the moment you may be, that may be accurate. But long term wise, you're very much creating your own internal disruption, right? You're creating the stress and the emotional drain that comes as a byproduct, a slow poison, if you will, over time that catches up to you in the worst way, right? That hits you and flips on like a light switch one random day to where you start realizing, oh my gosh, I'm miserable. I'm really not happy. Because learning to be silent in light of not being annoyed or, attacked by, or to not argue with your partner, to kind of try to outwit them, to keep them at bay, right? Is really you learning to lose your voice. The more you learn to be silent, is the more you learn to lose one of your most powerful tools, which is your voice, to speak up for yourself, which is one of the best and biggest acts of self-love. It's to self-champion for you. And if you are willing to allow the other person, your partner, to just always have the floor and just run wild with whatever thoughts they have, and to where now even they're starting to think that, well, they're in the right, or they're seeing things the correct way, because you don't give pushback at all. You never challenge anything. You never, bring a different perspective because you don't want things to get awkward or whatever. Then now you're not only silencing your own voice, but you're also hindering your partner's ability to grow, right? And ability to do self-reflection and to really go back and rethink the way they're operating, because it impacts you a certain way. They don't know what you don't say. Yes, we can assume they get some things, right? But assumptions are dangerous, because if they don't think the same way you do, you might be assuming that they're getting something that is not even hitting their radar, right? But there's a couple other things that happens as well whenever you learn to be silent in your relationship, beyond hindering your partner's growth, right? You also hinder your own, and I guess you could say you hinder both of your growth in one similar lane, which is the ability to resolve and work through conflict effectively. Any muscle that is not used weakens, right? We're in an ocean of motion. Everything's constantly moving, either growing or disintegrating, one or the other. Nothing stays stagnant. So whenever you learn to be quiet more often than not, right, to avoid the stress or the argument, or to avoid it being uncomfortable, or to avoid your partner attacking you verbally, or whatever the case is, right, the more you learn the solution is to just not say anything, or to avoid engaging in conversation altogether, then now you weaken your ability to learn how to face challenges and work through them effectively through communication. You hinder your communication abilities, right? It's like you don't have the answer for how to get over this wall because you never tried to climb the wall. You keep turning and going the other direction, or trying to go all the way around, or wait for the wall to move, right? Which sometimes never happens, or takes a really long time to happen, right? So you're really putting a dagger in your ability to have a healthy relationship. Because let's say this relationship even ends and you've built this habit. You're not going to just flip it on like a light switch when you go into a new relationship and all of a sudden start leaning into discomfort and challenging conversations. You're most likely going to carry that same habit into the new relationship. Yeah, maybe it changes over time. Maybe if this new partner that you have, if this winds up happening, It's different, and they're more embracing to certain conversations and dialogue. Yeah, maybe you do wind up bringing that muscle back or building it, but that's a gamble, right? But while you're weakening your ability to handle and work through conflict, you're doing the same thing for your partner. They're not having to learn how to work with you versus dictating things around you. Really bad for all parties in the equation. And the biggest issue you're creating for yourself as you learn this habit of being silent is you are silently developing resentment within yourself. Yeah, initially you don't think of it as this consciously, right? You think of it initially as I'm just preserving my peace, right? But every action, every step, every word not said in light of immediate peace is a step towards long term misery, right? Because every time you do that, it's another chip away from the self love and self care bucket, right? It's another, taking out of the pool of filling your glass up, right? The champion for you, so you can be healthy, happy, whole, and vibrant of a person. To where when you look up one day, like I mentioned a little earlier, and that light switch flips on, and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I'm not happy, or I'm depressed, or I'm drained, or whatever the case is. That's the moment that you are realizing how depleted you are in the realm of you being you, right? You've let yourself start to disintegrate because you haven't championed for yourself and for the experience that you need to have and want to have, right? And notice I said need first because we have needs. And when you stop speaking up, right, and you just let things go, more likely your actions follow you not speaking up. It's rare that someone just stops using their voice with their partner to avoid issues and all that, but then also goes and still does the things they need to do to get the experience they need without saying something, because that would still bring up conversations, right? It will still make you have to deal with the issue because your partner would notice you're not saying anything, but they would see your actions and now come question you or come confront you or come down on you or whatever the case is. So it's more than just you not using your voice when you learn to be silent. Your actions start to follow because the main reason you were being silent in the first place was to avoid discomfort in awkward moments. So you're more likely going to subconsciously follow through your actions as well of what you do or do not do in order to try to produce that same thing and maintaining the peace, right? So whenever you start to do this over time, you're chipping away at you being you because now you're doing less of the things that actually makes you the person that you like to be or that you identify as, or it causes you to do more things or work around in things. And now you're operating as someone that you are not. You're doing stuff that doesn't even align with yourself just to maintain this idea of peace. If you have to go around the problem, then the problem usually is not being resolved. You have to go through, and that's through way of your voice, right? You have to speak up. And here's the thing that happens. Either one or two things. You start to speak up, and in the beginning, yeah, your partner gets pushback. They don't accept it, willingly, because they're used to the norm of you not speaking up. They're used to you not saying something. They're used to you biting your tongue, right? And therefore, by default, they assume, well, they must be right, right? They assume I have the better perspective because you're not challenging it. You're not saying anything or whatever, right? Feeding their ego over and over and over, right? In an unhealthy way. So when you speak up, right, then now they may push back against that and want to, go against the grain because they're used to being quote unquote right or feeling that way. But they're slowly going to start to change and start to embrace what you're saying, because anything with repetition over time, people start to conform to some degree. So as long as you're consistent, right, and you're always in a productive headspace and approach in trying to navigate this, and they actually care about you, if your partner truly cares, they truly love you, not here just using you or whatever the case is, then they're going to slowly start to work with you versus continue to try to dominate and suppress your voice because that's what they were used to in the past. And once it starts to shift, then your relationship starts to shift. Then things become more vibrant for you again. You're creating space for you to be you again because your voice is speaking up for that space that you require, just as much as your partner is trying to speak up for theirs on their end. Or the next happens, right? The second thing happens, which is you start to speak up, you do it consistently, and your partner continues to push against it, and they just don't like it. They don't want to accept it, and they just fight it teeth and nail to where you learn this person doesn't work for you. Either way, you will be free to live in your truth and not feel suppressed to where you'll either create the actual peace that's sustainable for yourself in the relationship, or you'll get away from a person and get out of a relationship that was actually the root to why you can't have peace sustainably. So you can make space for the right person to come along to have that peace with. Big difference than you suffering in silence. So I cannot stress it enough. You have to begin speaking up today if you haven't been already. You take small steps, right? Pick a small little challenge, a small obstacle, a small, disagreement to start to build that muscle of speaking up and finding ways to do it and posing questions to your partner whenever they're not allowing you to try to speak up, right? Because they're used to dominating or whatever the case is. And hey, do you think it's helpful when you don't let me speak at all, right? Challenge their way of operating, make them think on their way of operating. If they truly care about you, they'll do that. And they won't have too good of answers as to how they're justifying what they're doing. And they're more likely to try to put an attempt into adjusting that or changing that. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but they'll put more effort into it. But that's way better than you building resentment over time that's towards them, because anytime you feel like someone is suppressing or a contribution to suppressing who you are, right? You start targeting them as that center focal point and reason as to why. And it makes you upset because you're not getting to feel great as being you in your own skin because of them. That's in your mind, right? So then you start feeling a way towards them and you start subconsciously operating in a way that shows it. You start, being mischievous towards them or, petty or, whatever the case is. And they start feeling that energy and it causes more issues. But then ultimately, you're creating the ultimate sense of resentment for yourself. See, we put the focal point on our partner because they were the kind of seed that sparked us starting to be silent, right? Or choosing to, but it was your choice to be silent and not use your voice. So really, it's ultimately the biggest sense of resentment you have for yourself for allowing this to happen. But they're the external source that you can put the target on so you can actually direct that anger somewhere, right? I never want that to be your situation, and it never has to be. So if you have built the muscle of being silent in your relationship, you want to learn how to speak up and use your voice and stop building that resentment so you can either have the relationship you want and deserve to have, or get out of the one you're in and make space for the one you should have, then email or DM me the word coaching and we'll get to work as long as you're truly ready to put the work in. If you're not ready for one-on-one coaching, don't have the time or the space, then email or DM me the word revival to join my Relationship Revival Hub community, where you can learn the same things I teach my clients one-on-one at your own pace, on your own time, through my live weekly coaching calls with Q&A lessons, my courses, as well as my exclusive content I make strictly for my members in there to answer all the questions and provide the tools you need to get the results you want to get. Either way, do something to get in the race. Let's get it.